Hi guys and welcome to my May wrap up. I'm Erika and this is what I have read this May. I have read quite a lot of books this May, even though I didn't expect it because I had so many exams, but I think I procrastinated a bit too much with my books. And the first book I read was Everything is Illuminated by Jonathan Safran Foer. This follows Alex, who is living in Ukraine, and this summer he went with a person from America called Jonathan to some place in Ukraine in order to find Jonathan's family. And now both him and Jonathan write stories about their adventure, and they kind of send these stories back and forth between them, and we get to read the letters that they wrote and also the stories that they are writing. So I thought it's a different way of telling stories, and this is honestly one of the better books that I read this year. I absolutely loved it. It was the first book by Jonathan Safran Foer, and I have to say I'm super impressed by his writing style. I thought it was absolutely lovely. This is the way I would like to write if I was a writer, because he kind of uses the words in new ways and combinations, and he gets more feeling into the story than anyone else that I've ever read, I think, because he uses them in new contexts and just really has a very varied style of writing. This is definitely a mixture between two different styles of writing. One is a fairy tale and one is the story of Alex, so it's more of a letter retelling of something that really happened, and it's a lovely mix, and there are so many good quotes in here and so much feeling, and yeah, I absolutely loved it. I thought it was great, and if you watch the movie you can definitely read the book as well, because they have changed quite a bit, but I honestly didn't mind that it changed too much in the movie, because that's a good story too, and this is just a different aspect of the same story. So if you like the movie, read the book. If you didn't like the movie, read the book. If you haven't seen the movie, read the book. If you have already read the book, read the book. Just read the book. Next up, I read a book for my Nobel project, and it is Dear Life by Alice Munro, who won the Nobel Prize a few years ago, and it is a bunch of short stories that all touch upon family life and just life in general, how it can be changed by the smallest instant. And it was interesting. I haven't really read too many short stories, so it was a bit of a new experience for me, and they all have quite similar themes. The trains, for example, come in a lot of them. Almost all of them happen in Canada. One story leaves, next one kind of picks up in the same spirit of that one, and yeah, it just shows different aspects of the same scenario most of the time. So I thought it was quite interesting, but I was expecting a bit more from Alice Munro because she's a very well-loved author, and I wasn't too impressed by her writing, but perhaps this is just this one book, because I didn't feel like it was too unique. It was just a book. Next one, I went back to a bit more YA, and it's Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. This is a story about Simon, who is a wizard, and he is attending a boarding school for wizards, and he was also the kind of the chosen one that's supposed to end the war between an evil mage and the wizarding world. Sounds familiar? Yeah. It's very similar to Harry Potter. Also, the characters are quite similar. We have, of course, the main character. We also have a kind of character that is descendant from an evil family that is always picking fights with the main character. And we have a headmaster that has taken a certain interest in the main character. We also have a clever best friend of the main character. We have a person living on the premises of the school that takes care of the animals that are a good friend of the main character. So we might find them very similar to, Draco and Dumbledore and Hermione and Hagrid. But the thing is that these characters all are quite a bit different from the characters in Harry Potter, and they play different parts of the story than in the Harry Potter series. So it's quite a nice way to think of this is how Harry Potter would have been if the stories had slightly different personalities. And I think it's actually really, really fun and interesting way of reading the book, because it gives you a bit more perspective to the Harry Potter series and why it played out the way it did. But it's a lovely one. It's also quite an intense love story going on here, and it's just amazing. I love it so much, and it's so cute, and yeah, I absolutely love this book. It is one of the cuter reads that I have read this year, and it's lovely, and I just get so many feels. Oh, it's so beautiful. Next, I went into a bit more of a serious fiction, and it is Half of Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, but it is centered in Nigeria during the Civil War, and it follows a family and different members of the family in the way they cope with the war. So we have the servant boy, we have the mother, we have the mother's sister, and we have the husband of the mother's sister that comes from England. And they all experience the war a bit differently because they have different viewpoints and perspectives of the war, and they are affected differently. And to me, this was kind of first look into the conflict, so I had a bit of a time to be able to keep up with what was happening. So it was nice. I feel like I have at least an overview of what happened and why it happened. But this one was quite centered around the politics. It wasn't. I expected it to be more of a emotional story, more like The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini, but this was actually more of a political. It didn't quite touch me as much as The Kite Runner did, but there were of course scenes that were quite vivid and really amazingly written that just got into my heart and really made me think. There's a scene with children playing in here that is just a few sentences, but I think I will always remember that scene because it's quite heartbreaking, even though nothing really happens, but it's beautiful. So I thought it was nice, but I felt like it could have been a bit more moving, and I feel like the author has the capability of making it moving, but she rather focuses on the politics and kind of doesn't change the pacing, so she has the same perspective on time all the time, even though something happens that is really exciting or something that is not too exciting. She gives them equal space in the novel, and I guess that's how it is in real life, but I don't know, to me it felt a bit, I was looking for something with a bit more tears in it. Next I read The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon, and this is about a boy named Christopher who has Asperger's syndrome, and one day he finds out that his neighbor's dog has been murdered, so he sets out to solve the mystery. But in the process he also solved some questions about his past and his family history. It was more serious than I thought it would be. I thought it would be a mystery from the viewpoint of a person with Asperger's, and it was. We really get to know his perspective, and to me I felt like I have more insight on how it is to have Asperger's. Of course I don't know how it really is, so maybe this is a really bad representation, but I felt like I learned something from it, and the perspective is really well written. You can really see the differences between what, for example, I would have written if I did the same mystery and what Christopher wrote about this mystery. But it is a bit more serious than what I thought. It has more of a family dynamic and more responsibility questions than I expected from the beginning. But it was a nice surprise. I was absolutely delighted when we get to know a bit more and have some more serious issues being picked up in this book. I know my mother also read this book and she absolutely loved it because I liked it too. I guess more people probably like this one. So it's a really good book. Many people have said so, and I agree with them. I think it's really nice and an easy and light way in kind of understanding more people. So definitely recommending this one. Then I read And the Mountains Echoed by Khaled Hosseini. Like I said before, I longed for something a bit more towards the Khaled Hosseini way when I read Half of a Yellow Sun, so I decided to pick up one of his books. I found this one in our living room. It's my mother's. I didn't even have to go to the library, which was awesome. I didn't know what it was about. I just picked it up and started reading, but it's kind of a family history that we get many different perspectives of, and goes on for quite a lot of years. I think it's 2 generations that get to have their voices heard in the story, and we get each perspective only once, so you get quite big chunks of perspective, but you only get them once. And I liked that with this one because you never knew what was going to come, and the way that he had to finish up the story of that person in the perspective, so you get too torn apart. I like the way that we kind of shaken a bit when they changed perspective, but after a few pages you found out how they were connected to the other perspectives, so you could enjoy the story. Family history doesn't sound too exciting, it sounds a bit boring, but I thought this was quite gripping. They all kind of were people that had moved from Afghanistan when things got hard, so we have a bit of feeling of like guilt and how are you supposed to go back and help people, or what are you supposed to do? You get some of these ethical questions, which I thought was quite interesting. It's a nice book, and it was kind of what I was looking for in the moment. Then I started summer a bit early and I read Maybe Someday by Colleen Hoover. This is a book about Sydney, who on her 21st birthday finds out that her boyfriend has been cheating on her with her best friend, so she is forced to move out of their apartment and tries to find a new place to live. And she ends up with a guy that she has been texting with before, and they have decided to write some lyrics together, so she moves in with him and the two of his roommates. And of course these kind of get involved and there is some love going on, but the problem is he has a girlfriend, so she doesn't really want to do the same thing that her roommate did to her, but she really likes this guy and it's just kind of hard for her and for everybody involved. It's hard. And I'd expected this to be a bit more light and fluffy and, you know, boy meets girl, they kiss, everything is great. But it had more ethics and morale, and you knew in the story that everybody couldn't be happy in the end. And you really liked all the characters, so you wanted them to be happy, but it wasn't possible and it was just quite frustrating. So if you're looking for something that will just make you warm and fuzzy inside, this is not the thing, because even though it is cute at times, it's just really, really hard. Yeah, the situations are really hard and you're just frustrated with all the decisions. It's just, yeah, it's hard. But I liked about this story that they write, of course, lyrics, like I said, and you get the lyrics, but you can also listen to the real songs online, and that kind of adds a bit more dimension to the story. You get a bit more feeling than if you just read the lyrics, because when I read them, I usually just skim through them and not really think about what they are saying, but now I listen to the songs and I was actually forced to read them quite slowly, and I think actually that added some feeling to the novel that just I wouldn't have gotten if it wasn't the songs in it. So I thought it was quite nice, it was different and I liked it. The last proper book I read was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Most of you have probably read the next book that just come out this month, but I decided to read the first one so I could jump on the wagon. And this, if you don't know, it's about a girl named Fair, and he accidentally shoots a fairy, so now she has to move to the lands of the fairies to live with a guy called Tamlin that is a High Lord, and she kind of hates the fairies because they have done some terrible things to the humans in the past. But when she comes there, she realizes that they're not as bad as she thought they were, and of course there's some love going on, and yeah, it's nice. And this part of the story I really like, but then trouble gets going and hell breaks loose, and it just kind of falls into the pattern of all YA stories. So I like the beginning, but I thought it kind of went off the good road after about half of the novel. And I was actually pleasantly surprised by the writing in this one. I hadn't read anything by Sarah J. Maas, but I didn't expect her to have such a nice language. For YA, it's quite old-fashioned language, has some very precise vocabulary and some strange way of putting together the word, but I enjoyed it. I felt it took me a few pages to get into her kind of rhythm, but when I got into it, I actually really liked it. But I'm quite scared about the sequel because everything ended quite nicely in this one. I like the ending, but now if she writes a new one, it's going to be just terrible. Something terrible is going to happen and it's all going to go to hell. And lastly, I actually listened to a book, and I listened to The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey, and it's kind of a alien invasion that has happened, and they have attacked in different waves with new strategies to wipe out the human race, and most of them have died, the humans that is. But we follow a few different humans. The main one is called Cassie, for Cassiopeia, and she believes that she might be the only person in her family to be alive and also the only person in the world. She doesn't really know. She lives in the woods and tries to struggle to survive, but is still having some hope in finding her brother that was abducted. So it's about her, and we also get to meet some other persons that all have kind of connections to her. And I like the way that the perspectives are given in chunks. Even though they are reoccurring, you get longer pieces of their perspectives and then do change, and then you get longer pieces again. So you get to have a bit more time with each character, which I thought was nice. And I also liked, I don't know if I liked it, but he kind of puts out many different clues, so you get to piece together what's happening yourself, but he puts out too many clues and waits too long in actually revealing the real answer. So sometimes you have known for a while what's going on, but he just takes so darn long time to confirm it that you just get really, you know, frustrated and just wanting to get it over with, because you know what's happening, but he won't say that it's what's happening, and you just want to get it over with. But at the same time, I mean, it was a nice story. It had many cliffhangers, many plot twists, and it was just a nice story. Though I didn't like that it was so much love going on, because they're an alien invasion, not a dating program. So that was quite typical YA thing. I expect there's going to be a bit more love triangles in the next few books in this series, but I hope I'm wrong, because I feel like they're a bit overplayed by now. But those were all the books that I read this May. I think it was about 9 of them, and I'm quite proud of myself for being able to read that much, even though it was quite stressful in school. Have you read anything in May? In that case, let me know, and if you have any suggestions of what I should read in the next couple of months, please tell me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!